Now, Ireland, or this country, will soon have the heaviest penalties in Europe for companies that allow children to gamble, the industry regulator has said. The Gambling Regulatory Authority of Ireland made the statement in response to a new European-wide survey that showed a significant increase in young people in Ireland who have gambled in the last year. The data also showed that rates of gambling among young people here are well above the European average. In Ireland, it found that 29.1% of young people in that age group had gambled in the last year. This was an increase from 24% in 2019. Founder of Tiglin Residential Addiction Centre in Greystones and independent member of Shannon, Aubrey McCarthy, is on the line. First of all, Aubrey, how significant of a problem is this in this country? And I mean, do we know what sort of debts are being accumulated by young people?
Listen, Ken, good morning and thanks for having me on. The report is absolutely stark, and you see that we have some of the highest rates of youth gambling in Europe. And the rehab centre that I'm involved in is Tiglin. I set it up in 2008 for the very reason that there wasn't enough facilities to help younger people and older. Substance abuse is falling, but gambling is quietly creeping in, and it's a quiet addiction, and it's causing serious influence, and it's causing serious threat, I should say, for society as a whole. Debts. There's a new thing that we've introduced. It's called Drive, and it's about intimidation. And usually, addiction such as gambling is a part of a poly addiction issue, and often there are other addiction issues as well. And therefore, the likes of Drive is an intimidation process that is brought up, and it's overseen by the guards, that we can oversee debts for gambling, drug debts, etc., that people can't be intimidated to pay them. However, we must say that gambling in itself was seen as harmless entertainment, but it's addictive, it's isolating, and for many, it starts at a very young age. So that's why this new regulation, where corporations are going to be penalised, and penalised heavily.
Okay, let me come to that aspect just a little bit later on. But first of all, do we know what youngsters, I presume these are teenagers under the age of 18, do we know exactly what they're gambling on? I mean, is it football matches or, is it horse racing, or is there any particular area where youngsters are focusing their bets, basically?
It's all focused on smartphones. It's all focused on what you can do online. And the problem here is it's cross. It perhaps starts with football, but it's across all the sports. And President Higgins was at a facility there for Tiglin recently, and he said his heart broke when he during the COVID pandemic, when he sees after every football match, in the breaks, in the ad breaks on television, there's adverts of how you can gamble. So society needs to be educated, but it affects youth in every aspect, and mostly it's online.
Okay, well, when we talk about these heavy penalties against these, I suppose, betting companies or corporations, what sort of fines are we talking about?
The fines haven't been decided yet. That has to be decided upon. However, they are going to be significant, and they're going to be the highest in Europe. But remember, you started off the show by saying we have some of the highest rates of youth gambling in Europe. So therefore, it sort of will coincide with that. And it must be to protect children.
Okay.
And that's why it has to start at a young age.
Okay, Aubrey, but isn't one of the difficulties here, and I'm only being objective with the question, that, we say pre the 1990s, if a youngster walked into a bookie shop, the person behind the counter could say, hang on, Johnny, you're only 14 years of age, I'm not taking a bet from you. But in the digital world, the companies can't determine who exactly is placing the bet.
That is 100% correct. But it still has to be monitored, and there are ways. There are things in place that allows you to produce an ID and an age verification. However, the problem with that is you could get your older brother to do it on your phone, and therefore you're able to use it as you are. So, if you look at the companies, what they've been doing to date, they've been grooming young kids to gamble. And that starts in the sponsorship of children's clubs and flashy ads, as I mentioned, during TV. And they're basically pipelines that normalize gambling. So not only is regulation key as they're bringing it in, but also we need to educate young people about the risks, about what can happen. And today in Leinster House, we're launching the annual report for Tiglin with stories from service users who have come through the process and seeing that gambling can destroy
Yeah, no,
lives.
but I mean, I suppose the spirit of this is common sense, and nobody would disagree with heavy penalties on betting companies. I'm just trying to work out in my head here, though, how a betting company that gets, we'll say, thousands and thousands of bets online every day, how it can determine that, bet number 54 for the 3:30 at Fairyhouse came from a 15-year-old. How do you work that out?
Well, that's up to the industry to regulate, and you have to hold the industry to account. And the same with in the porn industry. It's certainly, there are certain sites you cannot go onto unless you're over a certain age, and you have to make sure that you verify your age. So it's important that the industry comes up with their own protections in that. However, I will say, if you looked at the recent Adolescence, it was called, it was a series on Netflix, and it was a top downloaded series, and it showed how children from a young age can be impacted online, and it devastates their life. And gambling is part of that.
Okay, well, doesn't something, more effective need to be done, for example, in the school's curriculum, whereby a particular module in, whether it's for junior cert or leaving cert, teaches youngsters, the dangers of the new digital technology that we're all living with?
Now you're absolutely talking sense there, and that's why recently in Greystones, in Wicklow, we had a lady called Rachel Harper, a principal, but she brought in this thing, It Takes a Village, and it was to regulate the use of smartphones in primary schools. So the key here is to educate young people about the real risks, about gambling, but also other addictions, and then provide support to the schools and the youth service. That's early intervention. And then rehab services like Tiglin, they have to be ready to handle gambling addiction, just like substance abuse.
Okay, I mean, is there anything, you can advise parents to do? I know, and we've had, tons of stories on this program about the difficulties that parents are having now, where there's a bit of a disconnect between parents and their children, because their children are just constantly on the phones. They're not even watching television like they used to. They're not listening to the radio like they used to, because their entire world is consumed by what's on their phone. Is there anything parents can do in terms of positive guidance towards their children to say, look, Johnny, look, Mary, these are the dangers of the mobile phone world, and this is what you need to do to steer clear of trouble?
I see as a parent today, it is possibly the most difficult time to raise any children, and virtually all the lights on the dashboard are flashing red. And
Sure.
one of the key things is to involve your children in youth activities that are healthy. And that means sport on the field. That means, various youth cafes. We've opened a new one
Something else
in
to
Greystones.
something else to occupy their time, basically.
Something else. And do not underestimate the power of online and
All
smartphones.
right, we're going to have to leave it there. That's Senator Aubrey McCarthy, the founder of Tiglin, talking there about plans to impose very heavy penalties on companies that allow children to gamble, that allow children